Critiques of GDP, part of our lecture series on gross domestic product. In this video, we'll discuss why gross domestic product, while it's useful, does have some drawbacks and what we need to keep in mind when we're using gross domestic product to make comparisons. We start with this critique from Joseph Stiglitz, who won the Nobel Prize for economics, and I think it's a good quote to hear. It says, "For 60 years, gross domestic product, or GDP, has been the yardstick by which the world has measured and understood economic and social progress. However, it has failed to capture some of the factors that make a difference in people's lives and contribute to their happiness, such as security, leisure, income distribution, and a clean environment, including the kinds of factors which growth itself needs to be sustainable." And Professor Stiglitz is exactly right. This is gross domestic product does not capture any of these factors, and we can imagine that all of these factors would help contribute to well-being and are not measured by GDP. So what are we saying? We're saying that GDP doesn't measure the quality of our social or physical environment. It doesn't measure the amount of leisure time we have. It doesn't measure the things that we get from the government, and doesn't measure the stuff that is provided within the household, including the things that are predominantly provided by women in our society, such as childcare or meals. So GDP does not measure any of these things, and again, these things may have a big impact on quality of life. It also doesn't measure rates of poverty, so unequal distributions of wealth. It doesn't measure crime rates. It doesn't measure literacy rates. So these are other things that GDP can't capture that may factor into the country's well-being. We can also think about Equatorial Guinea, which is a country in Africa, and Equatorial Guinea has a quite high GDP per capita, especially compared to the countries around it, but it misses the whole story because that's an average, and what's happening is there are just a few people at the top earning a lot of money from the natural resources in Equatorial Guinea, whereas 44% of the population of Equatorial Guinea is very, very poor. So Equatorial Guinea shows you that GDP, when we divide it by the number of people, just gives us an average. And that average might mask the fact that there's a few people on one side and then a ton of people making very little on the other side. So we miss that when we take a look at a number like GDP. However, I don't want to get you in the idea that GDP is not useful. GDP is very useful. We just need to know its limitations. And it's a great way, it's a great simple way to understand the different facets of a country's economy and the basic well-being of its citizens.